The title of my talk is called Soft Stories. I like stories about architecture, and also I like architecture that makes stories. And more than that, I really like drawing cartoons and comic books. And to me, drawing cartoons and drawing together cartoon and architecture, it's what's really amazing about this little window that I found. Because the act of drawing architecture has so many facets. There's so many types of architectural drawings that you can make. And the very notion of representation, of making sense, and not necessarily just in the communicative sense of the word, but in an introspective sense of the word, when you explore something that is within oneself through drawing, that I find the power of cartoon and architecture. And if I were able to elaborate that a little more, I find the act of conflating theory, criticism, history, design together in this format of representation to be an act of most beautiful storytelling. So to begin my talk, I will first structure my talk, and I'll let you know that I'll tell two stories very quickly, and then I will show some thoughts and a couple of projects, and I'll end with two stories. So in this first story, you can see there's a man in a spaceship, and he is fornicating with a building. And he's saying to the building, "This is our secret, and no one will find us." Unfortunately, two detectives kick the door in, and they tell him, "Freeze, you're under arrest." And he says, "Why? Because I'm fornicating with an architectural figure of form?" And the detective says, "No, because you're fornicating with the wrong architectural figure of form." The detectives elaborate the reason why it's wrong by taking him to the archive of intuition, and because he's deeply violated the perimeter of conduct. Because they've exhausted every single iteration possible, and there are only three kinds of buildings that one is allowed to copulate with. The first type is iconography. The second kind is economy, a strong functionalism that allows a model to thrive in various contexts and conditions. The third is morphology, a resilient origin that responds to physical demands and result in transformation of the geometry. So the detectives are telling him that this thing that you're making love to is not an icon, not economical, and has no morphological basis. Therefore, it is simply ugly in a grotesque way. And as a citizen well-versed in the intricacies of syntax, ethos, and zeitgeist, we know your average taste, and we know you're choosing this, deliberately choosing this ugly thing in order to look smart, which is incredibly low and illegal. But the man defends himself by saying, "But officers, I'm not guilty because I'm in love. I understand that I've been astray from my reasonable behaviors, but I'm in love." And he says, "I have tried to objectively synthesize my perceptions, but I'm overcome by a precious sort of seduction enchanting me towards a terrible decision." And the second detective tells him, "You're right, you're not guilty. Love like yours is indeed precious and unique, which is why we have to assign a reference number to the thing that you're loving so that everybody can have sex with it." Second story. Second story begins with a man who's crashing back onto Earth in a spaceship. And he's being greeted by this humanoid person. And he says, "Hey, come walk with me to this place, this coordinate, where your house used to be." And he gets really worried, as you can see at the top. He's really worried because he's still paying mortgage. And he says, "What happened to my house?" And the alien humanoid person says, "Well, you space warped, and you've been gone for 10,000 years. your culture no longer exists. So he says, my anthropological thesis is focused on the average taste of the early 21st century. And I have so many questions for you. And my first question is, was architecture this or that? And he says, I can't figure it out because from the records of the academy, architecture was this. But from the findings of archaeology, architecture was that. And so to conclude my first question, can you tell me what may have possibly caused this divergence? And he says, everyone's dead. I guess I don't have to pay my taxes anymore. Really should have redeemed my Costco points. And then he said, no more Whoppers. And so the alien person takes some notes and he says, that's great, next question. So on top you can see predominant formal pretext for the academies of architecture circa 2010. And on the bottom you can see the majority of archaeological findings of architectural typology circa 2010. And so in the Victor Hugo sense of the word, this will kill that. This has no relationship with that at the moment. This drawing is a plan and a section. I really want to get into the next segment about this idea and a couple of projects. And I need to begin this segment by talking about what is a plan and what is a section. I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence because I think everybody knows what a plan and a section is. But I need to just emphasize that a plan is a vertical projection this way. And a section is a horizontal projection this way. And whether or not you cut it, if you don't cut it, it's a map. If you don't cut it this way, it's an elevation. So what I'm talking about is this projection versus that projection. But the plan, because of gravity, you're able to walk around freely. You're allowed to meander. In fact, you're encouraged to meander. And the very act of meandering is soft, like a story. It's very forgiving. A person could be trapped in a little room and spent a lot of hours doing something. Programmatically, from one space to another, juxtaposition, there is a new story for any inhabitant, and this does not have to be a hard decision. It can be a soft decision. And the inside of a building is where that takes place, when you can walk around freely. And you can identify qualities of the story when you make a corner turn, when you decide that there is a different program next to you, somebody's drinking coffee and you're just walking around. Or when you're overseeing a gap and there's a person who's looking at you, thinking, and you're thinking maybe I'm looking at him or her. The horizontal projection, on the other hand, is hard. It's different from the vertical projection when you can walk around freely, because the horizontal projection is about remembering something. When you remember something that is unforgettable. When you remember something that is unforgettable, that is the outline of the building, that becomes a character. The character from the outside in has a nickname. For example, the corn cobs. Or in these cases, a heart, a unicorn, a dinosaur. This relationship with the ground makes it unforgettable, which makes projection in this way less graceful than the projection this way. And I need to divulge into another story in order to make my point. It's about a primitive man who's stalking a deer. And he jumps over the deer and he hugs it by the neck and he slaughters it. He cuts the throat of the deer. And he peels the deer systematically. And he spends all night sewing it back together. As he sews it back together, he brings it over to the woman of his desire. He loves her, and he drapes the skin over himself, and he dances for her. And as he dances for her, the abstraction of his movements, the abstraction of his persona, becomes a new skyline of buildings. And when we think about the abstraction of persona, we need to think about persona. And when we think about youth, and the depiction or the caricature of youth, we think about Kouros, the Greek Kouros, who are incredibly static, like this, with a really strange smile. Or the David from Michelangelo, which is contrapposto, a little relaxed. Or Bernini's David, which is full-on action. And the distinction between the three kinds of youth is precisely personality and the abstraction of such movements or such different postures is the outside-in relationship of what architecture can be and what skyline could be. And what the skyline could be really becomes a perception or a reaction or emotional engagement to what this icon becomes. And so this is a study of such an act of producing abstract movements and postures, and trying to understand if you remove one's face, if you remove the details of expression, if the body becomes the posture, and the body becomes the expression of persona, and the body makes a caricature of the character, which becomes a new character, then the city could be really interesting. Right now, I'm showing you an installation from Bureau Spectacular. And we were trying to study what is outside hard and inside soft. And if the inside, this projection, and the story making is soft, the outside, the persona making is hard, the flipping of such a persona could create characters, like so. And this project is called White Elephant, privately soft. The outside is cladded with polycarbonate, and it tumbles in very many projections. And the inside is cladded with cowhide. And it is actually both soft in terms of storyline possibilities and soft in terms of texture and geometry. And if we think of that project as a way of thinking about abstraction of hard and soft, both this study and this study wants to think about the literalization of hard and soft. If the outline is literally soft and the framing of the story is literally a smooth set of lines or a willful set of lines. And if you correspond the framing to a mural, and if the person engages the mural like a comic book frame, and once you physically enter into the mural, you become a part of the story. So I'm going to end with these two stories. This first story begins with a man who's making a tie at 6:30 in the morning and telling his girlfriend that he has to go. And it's their anniversary. And she says, "Do you really have to go? It's our anniversary." And he says, "Yeah, and I'll be back in 1 year. It's a really prestigious experimental project. I need to be there. I need prestige." And he goes. And clearly he's really not happy. And he goes and he meets a scientist in a lab coat, and they get into this thing and they travel. And the scientist says, "It'll be a really good year. You'll see, it'll be a really good year." As you know, in 2009, Burj Dubai was completed, the tallest building in the world at the time. So people were asking, how high can we go? Where would it be? What would it look like? And in this world, the answer to how high can we go is until we run out of oxygen, which is stratosphere, which is roughly 12 kilometers into the sky, and that's roughly 7.6 miles. And so here, if you can see the ground, the datum line, you can roughly make out the skyline of Manhattan, because this building is the extrusion of Central Park for 12 kilometers. It has the capacity for 87 million people, which is the size of Germany in 2009. And it is no longer a question of a city within a building. It is economic and political structure within a building. And also, it reverses the figure-ground relationship of Manhattan, as well transforming zoning into a sectional decision, as well as housing typology in section, liberating the ground for deers and rabbits and whatnot, and responding to cloud condition. And so they get to the very top, and the man in the lab coat says, "As you know, it is physically impossible to live beyond tropopause. You are our experiment. Live here for 1 year. Show us that humans can live above stratosphere. And when you do, we'll build higher. So birds won't fly any higher, his girlfriend waits, and he stays. But there's a sequel to this story. He comes home. In the very first frame of the previous story, he says to his girlfriend, I promise I'll write. And he comes home and he says, hi, I'm home. I survived an entire year. Did you get all my letters? And she says, yes, all of them, every day of the week for an entire year. And your letters are making me really worried. This one, for example, you identify all the hours that you consider wasted in the week and you black them out. And she says, what's gotten into you? Were the trainings difficult? And he says to her, during my year of solitude, I've come to understand something really important, and I need you to understand. I want to be exceptional at what I love. So he has strategies in the head and geometries in the heart. And he says, the only way for me to be exceptional at what I love is to devote my entire self into it. I call this project the obsession accelerator. Is if I compact everything that I truly need into one little box and discard everything else that I don't need. And I'll spend my day and night in between the two boxes. And it's like a super cavity. If I'm inside, my box is white. If I'm outside, my box is black. And she says, well, that's wonderful, but where would I be in this picture? She waited 1 year after, and he says, you'll be with me inside my box, which is incredibly selfish, and he doesn't understand. As that statement simply breaks her heart, and she says, if you really loved me, you wouldn't do this. And she walks away, and he still doesn't understand. So this is the box. This is my house. It's called the briefcase house. It's an act of compacting everything that I do need so that I can be exceptional at what I love. Thank you very much.